Hello, my name is Casey Williams, Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Spring Hill, Tennessee, and welcome to Brilliant Strokes. Brilliant Strokes is an intergenerational art program provided by the Arts Build Communities Grant through the Tennessee Arts Commission. And if you would like to be a part of this program, you can register online through the city website, www.springhilltn.org, or through the Parks and Recreation's Facebook page. All of our instructors are local artists, and we are so grateful to them for donating their time and their talents to be part of this unique program. Have fun!
Hi, welcome back. It's Susan with Brilliant Strokes, and we're getting ready for lesson number 4 of the series. We're working specifically on learning how to paint in 5 steps with a special emphasis on the underpainting. And if you remember, in week number 1, we did a burnt sienna underpainting. In week number 2, we did the burnt sienna underpainting, we did our block in, and we did a wipeout of our lights and a darkening of our darks so that we had a monochromatic underpainting before we put any color on there. And then in week number 3, which was last week, we dialed up our underpainting by looking at our local color and determining where it was on the color wheel, and then either dialing up a color or 2, going warmer, or dialing it down a color or 2 to go cooler, and then we painted our painting on top of that. So we're going to get a little more intense today, and instead of dialing it up or dialing it down, this week's going to be a little easier, so you don't have to determine what the temperature of the color is to know how you want to skew it. All you have to know is what the opposite of that color is. And the opposite of the color is going to be its complement. So red and green are complements. Blue and orange are complements. Violet and yellow are complements. So go ahead and set out your paints and let's get started. I'm going to take my reference photo, and we're doing a portrait of 3 pears. I'm going to fold it along the vertical axis and open it up, and then fold it along the horizontal axis and open it up. And then where I have these sharp crease marks is my grid. So instead of doing any underpainting whatsoever at this point, I'm only going to be blocking in my basic shape. Now I'm going to use a little burnt sienna to block in my shape. I may add a little yellow to it, might add a little red to it, so that I have a nice, warm, neutral color to block in those shapes. So I'm going to start by putting some tick marks on my canvas to show me where that grid is. Now I don't want to put the whole grid on there, because when I do, many times that grid will show through my painting, and I don't want it to show through. So just with those tick marks, and maybe even just a little dot in the middle, in my mind's eye, I can see where that grid is. So now it's time to lay in the basic shape. So it looks like that pear, the middle pear, barely goes into the upper left-hand quadrant. Goes down below there. And it has a big round base to sit on. This one leans the other direction. And it looks like there is a horizon line about, let's pull this over some. And this one, it comes down a little bit more. Put that horizon line back there. And that's all the basic shape that I'm going to do for now. So I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush. Now I put out my regular palette, which is red, yellow, blue, black, and white. I use the Cad Red medium, Cad Yellow medium. Today I have Prussian blue, but I think you've got ultramarine blue in your package. Mars Black, Titanium White, and then I put out a little phthalo turquoise, love that color, and I put out a little orange. And the reason why I did that is because you can't always mix a pretty orange depending on the red and the yellow that you have. So went ahead and put a little bit of that on the palette. Whether I use it or not, we'll see, but I just wanted to have it available to me. So now I need to analyze my reference photo. And I'm looking at the background behind the pears. What color is behind the pears? Well, to me it looks a little peachy. And what is the opposite of peach? Well, peach is part of orange. In fact, it's a very light orange. And the opposite of orange is blue. So I'm going to take a little of that phthalo turquoise and a little white. And my phthalo turquoise, for some reason, is just really dry. It's a brand new tube, but it doesn't have any viscosity or fluidity to it. It's really, really dry. So I'm having to add some water to get it to flow better. And I'm going to paint that underpainting in this beautiful light blue color. If you don't have phthalo turquoise, you can just use Viridian. Might even add, or even cerulean. Might add a little white just to get it a lighter shade. Okay. Now I'm looking down at my pears. Now my pears are actually at least two different colors. In the light side, or the left side, which is where the light is hitting it, it almost looks yellow. And so what would be the complement to yellow? If you think about your color wheel, it's best to go ahead and memorize it now. But if you want to think about this, the complement to yellow is what yellow is not. Well, there's three primary colors: red, yellow, and blue. And if it's not yellow, it's red and blue. And red and blue together make violet. So I'm going to grab a little blue, a little red, and a lot of white, because my blue is so dark and my red is so dark that that almost looks black on my palette. So I'm going to add some white to it just to bring it back up to violet. And let's see here. Now there is a cast shadow on this third pear over here from where this middle pear is casting a shadow here. So its light is almost a stripe down the middle. and then clean your brush. All right, so now I'm looking at the shadow side of the pear. So it's a green pear in shadow. And what is the complement to green? Well, the complement is what green is not. So what is green? Green is blue and yellow mixed together. So what's not blue or yellow of the three primaries? It would be red. So we're going to grab some red. And paint the shadow side of the pear in red. Got two more shapes to go. We have the surface that they are sitting on. Now I want you to notice that the surface has light, except up here near the front, something is casting a shadow on there. Now, as the artist, you get to decide, does that add to my composition? Or is that distracting from my composition? For me, I think it's a little distracting. I don't want to include it. But what I do want to include is the cast shadow from this pear at the left going toward the right. The cast shadow from the middle going to the right. The cast shadow from the right going to the right. And if you look at that surface that it's sitting on, it looks to me like it is a tan or camel color. And that is a very neutral color which resides in the center of our color wheel. Well, as far as I know, the center doesn't have an opposite, because the opposite would be anywhere along here on the outer edge. So this is where I want to include my orange in the light and probably a nice dark blue in the shadow. So first of all, I'll do my blue. Make that blue go underneath to be the occlusion shadow as well as that cast shadow. And clean the brush. And then I'm going to grab that orange and paint the remaining underpainting. Now before we can go forward, this has to dry completely. So I'm going to take a break and use a blow dryer, and I will blow the painting so that it will dry, but I want to keep that heat moving. You don't want to just hold the dryer on there. Acrylic paint is flammable. You don't want to have a wonderful mistake when it explodes. So you have to keep the air moving as you're blow drying it. So give me just a second, I'll be right back. Okay, and now we're back. So what we did was block in our basic shapes and then colored an underpainting in every different shape within those shapes in the complementary color. And what is the complementary color? It is the color on the color wheel that is completely opposite of that local color that we're going to paint on top of it now. So now we're going to paint our painting like we would any other painting. And I typically start with the background and come forward. And that background to me looks like a nice warm peach. So we're going to grab either red and yellow to make orange, or you can just grab some already pre-mixed orange. Add some white to it to get it down into the peach shade. And I'll hold that up. And that's a little too yellow. I'm going to add a little red in there. Much closer. Okay, got a little purple in there. Got to be really careful because you don't want to muddy up your colors. And then let's go ahead and lay in our background color. Notice I hold my brush like a baton, like I'm going to conduct an orchestra. And I want to paint my background colors, but I want to leave a little air between the strokes so I get a little bit of that beautiful blue showing through. You may have noticed I didn't paint an underpainting on the stems of the pear because that's a detail, and we'll get to that later. We want to go in every direction. If all your strokes were vertical, it would look like it's raining. So we don't want to have all up and down strokes unless it is raining and that's the effect you're going for. If all your strokes were horizontal, it would look like reflection on water. Again, that's not what we want, so we got to make sure those strokes go in every direction. And if we ever paint a landscape that has a lake in it, we will do those sweeping back and forth strokes. But we don't want to do that here. We also don't want to outline our objects. I'm mixing up a little more of my puddle. And if I wanted to, I could mix that exactly the way I did before, and we would just keep on going without missing a beat. I may want to mix it up a little bit differently. So there is what we call gradation in the color. Light cannot hit an object equally everywhere. And where that light changes, the color changes just a little bit. So it just doesn't bother me that this color might change just a little bit as it moves around the page. It also looks like it's lighter up in this corner, just in case I want to go a little lighter up here. Okay, beautiful. Now, as we come down to the surface color, that is more of a camel color. So we're going to do red, a little yellow, white to get it light, and then ever so slightly a tiny bit of blue in there. Too cool, got to warm it up. Need to go lighter. Need to go a little warmer. Perfect. No, it needs to be even warmer than that.
Yeah.
Now, acrylic paints dry darker. If this dries too dark, I may have to put another little layer on here to get it lighter and maybe even a little warmer. But I also want that orange to show through from the underpainting, so let's give it a little opportunity to do its thing as well. All right, clean that brush. Go ahead and invest in paper towels, white paint, and yellow paint now. You're going to go through a lot of it. So now we have to paint our pears. And if you notice on the left side, they are very yellowy. So I'm going to start with yellow, add a little bit of that phthalo turquoise to bend it to green. So I have a very yellowy green, and really it's more yellow than green. So I'm going to add a little more yellow here. Not quite that warm, so I'm going to add some white. And maybe even a little more white. Okay, that's too yellow, so I'm going to go back and add, let's see here, a little bit of red and a little bit of the blue. Now we have kind of a half tone when it goes into the shadow, where it gets more chromatic and it gets a little greener. So I'm going to add that little half tone in here. this one, it does it on both sides of the shadow. And then we go into a nice dark shadow. So I'm going to have to add that Prussian blue. Maybe even just a small dot of black. Maybe even blend those together a little bit. Okay, clean that brush. And then the cast shadow. And does anybody know what color shadow is? Shadow is the color of the object that the shadow falls on, but darker and typically cooler. That's not 100% of the time, but most of the time it goes cooler, which means we take our color that we painted everything in light, but we're going to add some blue. So I'm going to add some blue to this, making it darker and cooler. And that might not be dark enough. Let's add a little more blue. That may not be blue enough. But there we go, our cast shadow and our occlusion shadow. Now the only thing we're missing now is our detail. So what would that be? Well, the first thing would be our stems. So I'm going to throw in some stems here. Like there might be some sort of dark line where that horizon line is. So I'm just going to throw a little in and maybe smoosh it around. What I don't want it to do is to cut my painting in half. So if I put it there, I'm going to run my finger through it so it's not so dark. Now I want to add a highlighted side to those stems. So I'm going to clean that brush really good. Maybe mix a little orange and yellow together for the highlighted side. Nope, more orange or more red. Looks like there might even be a cast shadow from the stem. Might even be a little brown down here in the pear itself. So anywhere you want to put in detail, this is where you would put it in now. And clean the brush. And now I want to add a little more yellow to add a highlight, but I'm going to add white to it. Because it looks more yellow. Oh, that's too light. And then I'm going to take some white and just work it in where that highlight is so intense. It just really works out any color. That's got too much yellow on it. I really just want it plain white. And I don't really see it on that one, but I see it here. I see it here. And then maybe even up here a little bit. And there we go. There's only one step left. And do you know what that is? Step number 1 is we block in our basic shape, because we're doing step number 2 at step number 1 and step number 1 at step number 2. So instead of doing the underpainting, the first thing we did today was block in our basic shape. Then we painted our underpainting, breaking the entire composition down into basic shapes and painting the complement of the local color in those shapes. Step number 3 was our regular step number 3, where we scrubbed in our basic color, the local color that we see in our photograph. Step number 4 was the magic stage, where we add our detail, we reshape our shapes, we add highlights, we add accents, we might darken a dark, lighten a light, we might run our finger through something so we have a softer edge, we might come in and sharpen an edge, we might even lose an edge. Like, I really don't see where the pear ends and the shadow begins there. And then step number 5 is to simply sign your name. And what we do there is grab a small round brush and we'll take this one right here. Choose what color you want to paint your name. Here I may choose blue. Water it down into an ink-like consistency. Twirl your brush in there to get a nice sharp point. Using your arm as a maul stick, you want to rest your hand on there. And then using very little pressure, sign your name. And you'll want to practice that because signing your name is harder than painting the painting, especially if you want it to be small and legible. And sometimes it's just easier to use a regular pen and just sign the back with the date and the name of your painting. If you have any questions, I want you to message me, and I want you to practice this week, and I can't wait to show you what we're going to do next week. We're going to pump up that underpainting even more.
So, if you like what you've seen and you want to take part in Brilliant Strokes, don't forget, go online to our Facebook page, that's Spring Hill TN Parks and Recreation, or to the Spring Hill City website and register. Registration opens February 18th, and the first 8 people to register for each class will get a free goodie bag. Can't wait to get creative and have fun.